I want to read something with you. You don't have to repeat after me, but I don't want to read it to you. I want to read it with you, okay? So just follow along in your heart, okay, as I read this right now. Paul is writing from prison, okay? He's writing from prison to churches that he planted, people that he loves, and he's just expressing his heart. You know, back then, you couldn't just tweet out any thought that comes to your mind. You had to pay money for quill, for pen, for papyrus and paper. You had to invest money into putting your thoughts out. You didn't just blurt it out on a computer. So you spoke more from the heart. You spoke more from an interior place, in that time period. So anyway, this is him writing to his beloved friends. He says, "As a prisoner of the Lord, I plead with you to walk holy in a way that is suitable to your high rank, given to you in your divine calling. With tender humility and quiet patience, always demonstrate gentleness and generous love toward one another, especially toward those who may try your patience." Let's rewind that for a second. Okay, always demonstrate gentleness and generous love toward one another. Okay, we can all get down with that, but especially. Everybody say, especially. Especially toward those who may try your patience. Let me reword that so we're getting it in the noggin, okay? If anyone tries your patience, demonstrate gentleness and generous love toward them. Be faithful to guard the sweet harmony of the Holy Spirit among you. I just feel the heart of the apostle here. Oh, I feel just a glimmer maybe of what drove this man to lay his head down for Rome. Literally, he got executed for the gospel, for the church. Be faithful to guard the sweet harmony of the Holy Spirit among you in the bonds of peace, being one body and one spirit, as you were called into this same glorious hope of divine destiny. It's beautiful. It's the Passion Translation of Ephesians 4, first 4 verses. And we're talking this winter, spring, about the culture of grace and creating a culture of grace. And last week we talked about the art of listening. I want to flip it a little bit. Hi, Jack. Welcome back. Welcome back. I want to flip it to the other side of the spectrum, the art of speaking. And because what we're essentially getting into here is is an environment that's conducive to life, like a greenhouse. We want to see a greenhouse established in our midst, in our lives, in our homes, in our church community. And a greenhouse kind of represents a very healthy atmosphere. Represents, really, it's not even just a healthy atmosphere, but a greenhouse represents an atmosphere that maximizes that which can create health, okay? So it doesn't actually do anything magical, but it allows for the magic of growth to happen. How many understand that some environments are toxic? Yeah, right? Some environments can be absolutely toxic, filled with just the chemicals and the bad UV rays of judgmentalism and gossip and, bickering and factions and, all that kind of stuff. So we're all familiar with toxic environments. We want to create a life-giving environment. So I'm going to run with this greenhouse analogy with you guys a little bit because the Lord gave us a word a few years ago. It's something that came in my heart in prayer, and then actually Rich Seidler had a similar vision at an elder meeting of a greenhouse, and it was something we just felt like, wow, God's going to build a greenhouse here. And this is part of what the Lord is releasing in the Spirit, right? So this has come up in other times as well, but a greenhouse, plants need a few things to thrive, right? They need light and they need warm temperatures. They need some other things too, but those are key ingredients, and so a greenhouse allows for that to happen, where you got glass or maybe plastic, something clear that the light can come through. Hopefully it's in a place where it's focused on the light, it's in the right space and the light penetrates, but then the glass traps the heat in. So it allows not only for light, but for warm temperatures to grow in that place, providing those two key ingredients for plants to essentially thrive. So plants are a living organism. They can teach us something about ourselves because we are living organisms, okay? And we're a more complex organism, but we're also made to thrive. Can I get another nod? You're made to thrive. Yeah. You're made to thrive. And the question that I'm posing here as we're going through this series is, what does an environment look like that allows for thriving to take place? And for today's purpose, I want to just talk about how so much of it comes down to communication. It really comes down to the way that we speak to one another. Okay? So we talked about listening last week. I want to talk about speaking this week, okay? Can we do that? All right, Jesus, help us. Say, help me, Lord. Thank you. I'm going to go further in the Passion Translation, chapter 4, the end of Ephesians, verse 29. It says, never let ugly or hateful words come from your mouth, but instead let your words become beautiful gifts that encourage others. Do this by speaking words of grace to help them. Wow, it's good. That's good, right? I don't even need to preach. I just read the word. That's all you need, really. Come on. I do want to give it to you in other translations, though, because it's helpful to hear it in different ways. So this is the NIV. It says, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And I like the Message version here. It says this, watch the way you talk. Let nothing foul or dirty come out of your mouth. Say only what helps, each word a gift. Maybe this is why it says be slow to speak, quick to listen, right? Because you need time to gift wrap. You got to gift wrap your words, You don't want to just blurt them out. Words are precious. Words are precious. They're a precious commodity. That's why I said what I did before about, back in the day, writing a letter was a big deal. You put a lot of thought into it. We've kind of lost a little bit of that in the age of the internet. It's just, there's a lot of wonderful things about the age we're in, but there's a lot of stuff we got to keep an eye on, right? And one of that is the devaluing of language and words and how precious words are. Okay, so we can't talk about a culture of grace without talking about this, right? Without talking about talking, communication. Because according to this passage, your words are ingredients to building others up. Now that's a pretty big deal, okay? So this isn't that far from the greenhouse analogy at all, really, because plants literally get built up. They grow, they blossom in an environment that is conducive to certain ingredients. And people can be built up in a certain way. People can wither or blossom depending on the environment they put themselves in or they find themselves in. Okay, how many are aware of that? How many have seen that, right? How many have seen withering, whether in yourself or others, right? But people can blossom, individuals actually can grow in fragrance and color. The full expression of who God made them to be, that shining diamond inside of them, in an environment of healthy words, growth can happen. Some of the most withered, the most defeated, the most emotionally challenged people that I've met over the years are those who've grown up in environments where foul, unwholesome, even hateful words were in the atmosphere that they found themselves in. And it caused them to wither. It caused them to shrivel up into this, kind of closed up, self-introspective, or maybe deformed, angry personality. We're not too different from plants. Have you guys heard of the water crystal experiment? Dr. Emoto's water crystal experiment? Some of you have. Yeah. Well, I'll explain this for everybody, but this is a fascinating study that this Japanese scientist did with observing water crystals, molecules on the molecular level under a microscope. He looked at the molecules of H2O in water after certain words were spoken over them. And they did this with music too. I mean, there's been books, there's been multiple studies on this whole thing. But they observed these molecules within water, the very things that hold, the water together, that is the water, right? And there was two different results. On the left there, that's what it looked like when words of love and encouragement were spoken. Like the actual molecules within the water became symmetrical. They became whole and beautiful, right? Like a snowflake. And then on the other side, right there, that's when words of hate or anger or criticism came forth. It started to get more discolored and malformed. Now, this becomes a little scary when you think that more than half of you is made of water. Whew. I mean, I thought it was 70%. I did the research. I always want to have my facts right. And it's more like we're 50 to 60% water. We're 50 to 60% water. However, your heart and your brain is 73%. So there's a lot to ponder, to consider in the implications of this experiment, that water itself can be affected by words, by things that are released. And, we have science and scripture working together very clearly, as I believe they always do, but this is one of those moments where it's like very clear. This is something to pay attention to. This is something that we want to really think about. So, what is the environment? I'll ask you personally just right now for you to ponder, consider for yourself. Like, what are the environments you're in? What are the environments that you're finding yourselves in relationships where words are spoken, okay? Are the people you're connecting with, are they emitting a healthy vibe, good vibrations? Anybody with kids in the house, couples, like, what's the atmosphere of your conversations? Because our children literally soak in that atmosphere that we let out through our words. Come on, nod if you know what I'm talking about. What is the atmosphere like at your jobs? All right, different responses to that. All right, for most of you guys, you don't have much of control over this one, right? I mean, it is what it is. But not really. It's not is what it is, because you get to actually contribute to the atmosphere way more than you realize. You get to either put more toxins in, or you get to just take some stuff out. They're actually finding the hole in the ozone layer that they discovered in the 80s. Anybody remember this? They found a big gaping hole like in the ozone layer. It's starting to close up. It's being healed. And the reason it's being healed is mostly because they removed one chemical that was in aerosol cans. They outlawed it, right? Rich, you probably know a thing or two about this. Yeah. Used to sell it. All right. Everybody just pray for Rich, okay? So you were told at some point that was off the...
Exactly. They taxed it extremely high and then eliminated it.
Wow. Okay, Rich, I want to get that on the audio. Rich is the owner of a chemical company, and he said they taxed it high, and that eventually led to it just being eliminated. You couldn't sustain it buying that product. One chemical. Do you know there could just be one little thing in your life that you could adjust? There could be one little pattern of talking, of speaking, that you could just tax really high and get rid of it. Like seriously, like put a tax on it. Like every time I say like this, every time I talk like this, that's not good. That I'm going to pay for that. I don't know what that looks like, but put some pressure on yourself, right? To eliminate. There could just be something so simple that you could eliminate to all of a sudden close up any holes in the atmosphere around you and begin to release life and protection back into your heart. So back to this powerful verse here. It says, but instead, here's where we need to go. But instead, let your words become beautiful gifts that encourage others. What are you handing out to yourselves and to others? What are those, what is it? I want this to be a very just, kind of thoughtful journey here for us, just to think through, take some inventory. If you're wondering at all if your words are beautiful gifts or not, you can ask yourself the question, do I speak like God? And in case that's overly complicated or too high and mighty for you, I just want you to think of how simple God spoke. First time he spoke, it was really dark. The earth was formless, and he said, "Let there be light." And in a moment, God just revealed his heart to speak to the potential of a dark, formless situation. So, in other words, God's communication, God always speaks to the potential. He always speaks hope. He always speaks light into things. And he's not afraid to confront darkness, but when he deals with it, he speaks truth. He speaks hope into these situations. God believes the best of every single one of you. Like, listen, you might not believe the best of yourself for whatever reason, but God believes the best of you. And you can't change God's mind. You can make him in your own image. You can make him angry and nitpicky. But you can't change who the living God is. He believes the best of you. And so God's words to us come out of that heart of believing the best of others. Now, do you see why we have to really understand identity to get this stuff? And we have to understand the identity of humanity too, as the children of God. We have to see everyone through the eyes of the one who died and bled for them, right? This all starts there, It always goes back there. This is why identity is not a side subject. It is the foundation that leads to a healthy society, right? So we have to continually renew our minds, who we are, who people are. It says then, do this, encourage them, build them up. Do this by speaking words of grace to help them. So how many of you know that people need help? How many here need help? All of us, we're just so needy. We need help. It's okay to admit that. It's called humility. People are beat down. We're all beat down. There are so many things in life. There's so many stresses. There's so much stuff that's fatiguing us. And our words can either partner with that fatigue and that stress and that beating down, or our words can become wind in people's sails. So, releasing words of grace is about becoming that support, that encouragement to people. Now, here's the deal. Here's where we get back to that word, that statement, especially those who try your patience. sometimes the people who we're most tempted to speak harshly to are the exact people who need the most affirmation and encouragement that we feel they don't deserve. Oh boy. Now, I want to make something really clear again about God's not afraid to confront darkness. In a culture of grace, there can be hard conversations. So, when I talk about speaking words of hope and life into people, that's the atmosphere, that's the tempo we talked about last week. There needs to be an underlying rhythm of love to your communication, your dialogue, that everything else comes out of, right? You can throw in your vocals, you can throw in your some different things that might communicate certain tough things to people, but you want to have that rhythm of love. The culture of grace is not afraid to deal with tough things and to bring a word of constructive criticism. Notice the word constructive, which ties in with building people up. I'm not even a fan of the term constructive criticism, to be honest with you, because sometimes constructive criticism is just a way that somebody can get their issue out with you and try to call it nice. So you know what I'm saying, though. We have to still confront things. There's hard conversations that need to be had. So I don't want to minimize that. Instead, I want to talk about what that looks like, okay? I want to take a few minutes this morning to talk about what does it look like to turn criticism into a word of grace. Okay, can we do that for a few moments? Because this is important. This is like the rubber hitting the road. I love to preach on this glorious, wonderful thing God is doing across the nations and in our hearts, but this is where the rubber hits the road. How do we speak difficult things to one another? How do we turn words, even words of criticism, into a word of grace? We're only allowed to let words of grace come out of our mouth. Okay? So what does a difficult word look like in light of that? I'll tell you what, it looks a lot different from the way that it usually is in this world. Okay? There's a different feel to it. There's a whole different rhythm to it. So let me back up to the people that are feeling beat down, right? Which is all of us to some extent, but so many people out there, they're so beat down from life that one word of criticism is like an axe against an already cut into tree. So imagine for a moment that an axe has been beating a tree like all day long, and then it leaves kind of this if you could imagine like a gaping triangle in the middle, like if you just kind of pushed against it, that timber, right? That thing is coming down. That's kind of like the person who's just been beat up by life over and over again. Maybe the axe kind of started with their parents. Maybe it started with some other situations. Maybe it started on the playground. Like there's just stuff that started to tack down on this growing, tree plant of their life. So their tree is already cut into. There's already this big gaping triangle right there, and then we come along. And we just say one little negative thing to them. We just give a little push, and it's like they fall apart. Has anybody experienced this? Right? Like we just erupt in anger. Some of you have experienced this personally. You're the one erupting in anger, right? Right? We overreact. We freak out. And it really had nothing to do with the word of criticism. It's that there was just so much pent up, built up insecurity and stuff that just piles up in life that again, this person comes along and just says one little thing, and boom, you just overreact. I ain't preaching to you guys, I'm preaching to myself. Right, my love? She's here in the front row today, guys. I mean, she's usually like with the kids. I got to be careful. I got to be like more real. No, I had that situation this week where it was just one of those days. Things were tacking at me all day, and she comes and brings one word that wasn't even a criticism. I mean, it was really like, hey, can we just work on something here? And I just popped a gasket. So this happens. This could be a lifelong thing, it could be one day, So first of all, in dealing with these situations, whether it's for ourselves or you're the person trying to bring, correction to somebody else, first of all, we got to just pray. We got to pray that people whether it's ourselves or others, will lighten up. Okay? Solomon, who we talked about a lot last week, said this several times in his book of wisdom. He said that a fool rejects criticism. A fool rejects criticism. So, there's treasure, there's gold in opening up to being more teachable in life. Right? There's riches and silver and all kinds of things in learning to be more teachable, in learning to take criticism and take a deep breath with it. Okay? So that's the first thing. We got to work on ourselves. We got to pray for others, you know. But let's talk about the actual delivery of the word, okay? How do we deliver words of criticism? How do we move forward with that? So back to the art of speaking here, and back to this analogy of a tree that's been cut into. Remember, there's this big gaping hole there. I would say before we bring criticism, we have to be committed to helping fill that hole with hope. Okay, we have to be committed to not just fill the tree, fill this thing with the problem, but to bring solution and to bring encouragement in the midst of it. And I'm not talking about flattering people. Like, I think that's what some people hear with a message like this. Oh, I'm just supposed to flatter this jerk before I tell him the truth, you know? Like, you know, I'm not talking about flattery. I'm talking about you actually having to dig deep and find some gold in that individual and call out that gold. Because God looked at this formless, dark earth and he saw potential. He saw whales. He saw mountains. Whew. He saw wine and poetry. I mean, anybody else looking at that thing, if there was an international space station floating around planet Earth right then, they would just see dark, murky water, just a big ball of nothing. But God looked at it and he saw sunrises and sunsets. Man. So we have to ask God to sharpen our prophetic vision with people. We have to ask God to show us the potential in people and to speak to that person according to that potential, to offer hope in our words. And then we can slip in, you know what, there's an issue here that I feel, can we talk about this? Notice the I statement. Any counselors in the room? I statements, very important, right? Starting off with you always do this, you did this. That doesn't work that well. Especially when you use the word always. Come on. Really? It might be a lot, but it's not always, okay? Exaggeration will kill the conversation. Remember that. Exaggeration will kill the conversation. Right? Taking notes, okay? Write that down. Okay, so I statements, you're not coming from a position of blame. You're saying, I feel a certain way here in this situation. I've felt, misheard. I felt misunderstood. I felt like, I'm alone on this thing right now. I feel like, can we talk about this? Okay? And listen, depending how axed down that individual is, there still might be, insecure defense mechanisms that come up. But we can't be afraid to speak the truth. Can't be afraid to just go there when we're doing it from a place of love and believing the best in them. And I'm telling you, people will feel it. When you grow in this, when God gives you a vision to see people the way that he sees people, they will feel it. I have given incredibly difficult words of correction to people. Not a lot in my life. It's something God's working on me with. But there have been moments where I had a relationship of trust established and I had to deal with an issue, like a sin issue, and I called it out, and that person felt relieved that I went there. But I didn't start with that. You understand that, right? I didn't start with going into that particular issue. So, I statements are important. And of course, guys, this comes into communicating with our kids, grandkids. This is big for parenting. Like, when our kids mess up, we have to separate behavior from identity. It all comes back to identity, right? Because look at the you statements, going back to that for a moment, like the you stuff, that kind of speaks like this is your identity. You're a bad person. You always do this. This is who you are. You're reinforcing a false identity to them. And so when we correct our children, when our children do something really wrong, we call out like that behavior, what you did was wrong, but this, daughter, this is not you. This is not who you are. You're better than this. You're better than that. There's still consequences for this behavior, but I'm not going to put the behavior and who you are in the same package. Is this making sense to anybody? Any of this stuff speaking to you? So this is so vital. I really feel in the bottom of my heart, in the deepest places within me, that God is about to just blossom in this place out of our identity. He wants us to just begin to shine more. And this has got to translate in how we talk to each other. It's just, if revival is just going to be sitting like on the floor face down, laughing and weeping for hours, and then the people get up and still talk the way they used to their spouse, their friends, their coworkers, I don't want that revival. It's got to look like something healthy and strong. And listen, when you mess up, you have to speak your identity over yourself. So let's just bring all this to a close with this, okay? When you mess up, because this is all a growth process for us, when you struggle with this, you don't begin to identify yourself as that jerk. You got to say, okay, that behavior was off. That's not who I am. I'm going to get back in the swing of things here. I'm going to step back up to the plate. It's never too late. Somebody say that with me. It's never too late. Come on, don't give up. Don't give up on this stuff, guys. Really, do not give up on these concepts. God could redeem a situation overnight. I mean, Abraham in his 80s experiencing just the fulfillment of stuff that he waited on for so long. I mean, don't give up on this. Well, I want to invite the worship team to come up because I want to pray for you guys. I want to pray for all of us to receive the words of God over our lives afresh. I'm going to be honest with you. You literally cannot walk out of this room, walk away from this message, and do all of this stuff without knowing how God feels about you, without knowing what He says over you. Okay? If your image of God is somebody who is harsh and, again, like nitpicky and on you, like if you have, maybe it's a parental image of God, maybe it's a priest or someone in your past that superimposed their face onto God. Like, you got to allow Jesus to break that down and reveal the face of your Abba Father. You just got to allow Him to do it. You got to allow Him to just tear down these false images of God. When God the Father spoke for the first time in the New Testament, you know what He said? He said, "This is my beloved boy, in whom I am well pleased." God, the first time God the Father spoke, His voice broke out over Jesus, and Jesus stands in for us, by the way. He represents us. So you can receive this for yourself. He stands over Jesus, and He says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." I take pleasure over their life. You have to receive that word for yourself. You have to receive God's pleasure over you, the thoughts that He has, the words that He's speaking over you. And that will transform the way you speak to others. All right, let's stand together, okay? Father, I want to ask that you would touch each one right now. And let us hear more deeply in our hearts. This right here, this is my girl. This is my beloved boy. With him, With her I am well pleased. Put your hand over your heart for a moment. Father, speak to our hearts right now. Speak to our hearts. Now I want you to put your hands on your mouth. Father, guard my mouth. Guard my tongue. Make my mouth a spring of refreshing water to a weary world. God, make my mouth a well of pure, pure water. In Jesus' name.